This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The champion, welcome, Danny Batten.
Hey guys, I'm Sai and welcome to A.C.E Podcast Nation, the home of the Danny Batten Fight Show. This is episode number 101. It is fight night here on the channel and we have a beautifully blockbuster show for you for tonight. Absolutely massive, as we are joined across the pond by another guest from the world of combat sports, as well as a second guest later on. Excited to say, and we'll also be talking the latest news, results from MMA and boxing and whatnot. But you can send your questions via the live chat, and if it's going to be a busy evening this evening, I imagine, on the live chat on the three platforms. So if you want to send a super chat on YouTube, that will guarantee you get your question answered. But as mentioned, we're live Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at the moment. And as you know, A.C.E Podcast Nation, you're home to many great shows and series featuring top guests, expert analysts, and more. So give us a follow on social media, subscribe to that YouTube channel, click the bell for notifications, and you'll never miss a show. If you prefer your podcast in audio form, we are, of course, now part of the Sports Social Podcast Network, the UK's first dedicated sports podcast network. You can find this show and, of course, all shows produced by A.C.E Podcast Nation at www.sport-social.co.uk. And we have the brand new third series of My Story dropping this week, which is a life story series. The first two series were very well received. We have all sorts of people on that, from actors, fighters, footballers, and all sorts of other people, just different what's the word I'm looking for? Different areas of the world, sport and otherwise. But joining me as ever is former Cage Warriors champion, UK MMA legend, Mr. Danny Batten. How goes it, my friend?
Yeah, I think it's real good. I can't wait to talk about the UFC a bit later on. But let's not jump the gun because, like you said, we've got some great guests on. But looking forward to talking about it because we had some great female bouts. Really enjoyed them. Yeah,
there was some awesome fights again, mate.
Yeah.
We've been very, very blessed over the last couple of years for these fights. It's just been incredible. It's I'm just looking forward to a really good show. We've got, first and foremost, our guest this evening, or our first guest of the evening, is Josh Reichardt. He's a US amateur MMA fighter and kickboxer. Welcome, Josh. How are you, my friend?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me today.
That's all good, mate. All good. Really looking forward to it. Of course, we'll be joined by Cage Warriors president, Mr. Graham Boylan, a bit later on in the show. So check out that later. Stick with us. And if you want your questions asked, as I mentioned, you can send them in for the people. But a few comments already, Danny. We've got a Cage Warriors featherweight champion of the world, Jordan Vucenic, says, oh my God, it's Danny Batten who defeated John Kavanagh via submission and has also never lost in his Cage Warriors world title. Oh my God, wow. And JB Graham says, is that the world-renowned Danny Batten? I feel like you might be getting some stick tonight, mate. I think it's coming.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Welcome
together are trouble.
Yes, indeed. Welcome to everyone. It's going to be a busy one, I think, as people join us. But yeah, so Josh, I think first and foremost, mate, tell us a little bit about yourself. As mentioned, you're an amateur fighter, so you're on the up and early into your career. So you do kickboxing and MMA.
Correct.
So what was your most recent fight and how did it go?
My most recent fight was a kickboxing bout, and it went fantastic. I won by doctor stoppage in the first round. I actually took it on short notice, and I was pretty pleased with the outcome of that one. A little bit about me. I'm 26 years old, born in the United States, trained in the United States. I'm from New York, more specifically Buffalo. It's about 8 hours away from New York City, so I don't really get the pleasure of training in New York City with all the high level guys and gyms out that way. So I'm more upstate New York, and I train with my coach Keith Ferrant. He's a Muay Thai specialist. He's also a professional MMA fighter. He fights for King of the Cage.
Excellent, good stuff. So you mentioned just before we went live when we were talking, waiting for Danny, and he said you said that obviously you were hoping to turn pro by the end of next year, but you think that you probably would have turned pro already if it weren't for COVID. Like, how much of an impact did the sort of COVID situation have on your career?
Had a big impact because so my main goal is I want to get about 10 to 15 fights total, roughly about, I want 10 MMA fights. So I wanted to have a big and active 2020, 2021. And with COVID, that shut down everything in the States. We couldn't even train. I'm in New York, and the government's more involved with COVID versus some other states where they're a little bit more relaxed. So our gyms were shut down for the longest time. We couldn't train for close to a year. And obviously if we're not training, we're not fighting. And that stunk because, like, I think 2 weeks before everything shut down, I had a fight lined up, and then I was going to fight probably 4 or 5 times a year. And I lost out on about 2 years of fighting from that. So now I'm just trying to pick up where I left off, get as many fights as possible, and go pro by the end of 2022. Because I'm 26, I'm young, but I'm not, young. So I want to get to that high level, those major promotions by 30.
Good stuff. Like, COVID has had a massive effect. It's decimated the UK amateur scene over the sort of last year to 18 months, really. There was literally no amateur fight. I mean, really, there was no MMA outside of Cage Warriors. It's been brutal. Was it similar? Like you said, the government has quite a heavy say in what was going on with COVID and things like that. Was there literally just no chance of anything throughout that period?
Yeah, really, you couldn't find any promotion. And even if you could find a promotion, the tough part is you're allowed to fight, but for the amateurs, the promoters make money on ticket sales. People got to go to the events, and the government wasn't allowing crowds, so no promotion was putting on any fights. So no, and then on top of that, some states you weren't allowed to train. So if you were in a state where the government wasn't heavily involved, you could probably train and fight and have these crowds. But in New York, the government said you couldn't do any of that. So unless you traveled as an amateur, it was tough. So we did really kind of, like you said, we were shut down for like a year and a half. And once things opened up, everyone immediately started going back to it. So I've been, this year I've been pretty active. I've had 4 fights in I think like 6 months. So, but it was tough for a while. You couldn't even train, let alone fight.
Yeah. Danny, you obviously with your amateurs, you know how difficult it's been. But like, how important is it now to get these amateurs back fighting? We've seen a few of the Cage Warriors Academy shows. There's already been, I think there was another Welsh one, or there's another Welsh one coming up. And I'm sure there's others around the country. Like, how important are those types of shows and just getting the amateurs back, getting their fights and as much experience as possible?
Yeah, well, what people got to understand is, a lot of successful gyms, regards having some standout students that are fighting on the pro scene, that are upheld largely through the grassroots level guys being the amateurs. And there's a lot more amateurs they are than the pros. The pros, the ones that push through and start getting any kind of recognition for what they're achieving, are quite few and far between. There's a lot of amateur numbers that come through and get filtered through, that get through to the pro and there onwards to successful pros. So yeah, there's a lot of frustrated students wanting to fight, but there was nowhere for them to go. It's really, really difficult times, but the floodgates are really opened up. We've been really, really active with our investment in getting our amateurs out there and on any cards that are available. Luckily, the one that we deal with mainly is, here we go, forgetting promotions names now, Battle Arena. Battle Arena put on really big cards. I mean, they've been known to put on up to 39 bouts on a night, and they're pretty frequent as well. They do fight shows all over the UK. So, thank goodness we're linked in with that promotion. And we can have, 6, 7, 8 guys on a night when we send them up that way. So, yeah, I mean, there are ways around it. It was a difficult time, a frustrating time, but the ball is rolling again. I just hope that we don't have the door shut on us again. And I know out in New York, it's really hard. I think you can blame that de Blasio character for all the lockdowns that happen in New York. I do take a little bit of interest in the politics in the States. It's quite interesting with Biden. I don't know. It'd be nice to know what you think of the way that he's running. You might be a fan of Biden, but I don't know. Over here in the UK, when we look at the politics and stuff, we can see that, you've got really, really frustrating times out there, particularly in New York. I know things have been real, real tough.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel your pain.
Yeah, I mean, the politics over here, it's definitely it's interesting. So I'm especially with the presidents. Personally, I wasn't a fan of either of the ones that were running. So I just kind of was like, I think I'm going to keep my nose clean with that. But even with like the governor, our governor recently just got kicked out of office because he was found in investigation for like sexually harassing a bunch of people. So now governor switched in policies because Cuomo was making a lot of the rules where we couldn't go to the gyms and everything else like that.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was frustrating to the point where even the Donahue's death squad, they moved all the way down to Puerto Rico to train because they couldn't deal with any of the restrictions with their high-level guys. That's where I know Gary Tonin on the show. He was training with them for a while. I don't know what happened when they went to Puerto Rico. I know some of them kind of split up. But, I mean, yeah, people were literally leaving the state to go train other places because we couldn't do anything.
Yeah, yeah.
It makes it very difficult. Way to put him on the spot, Danny, as well, by the way. Bring up politics.
Yes.
Ask away, like, Jesus. We'll throw to a couple of questions from the live chat straight away, Josh, because we've got some straight away in there for you. So let's have a look. Rob says, apart from yourself, who's the best person to come out of Buffalo and why?
I'd say as far as fighting, Patchy Mix, or Patchy No Love Mix. He's a Bellator fighter. I believe he's top 3 or top 5 in Bellator. He just recently submitted James Gallagher in Ireland.
Right, yeah. Impressive.
So I'm from Buffalo, and it's a little bit different from New York. So in New York, MMA was actually illegal up until 2016. So it's still relatively growing in this area. And for him to come out the way he did, because he rose right through the amateur rankings, cleaned house in King of the Cage. He actually, his only loss was to Juan Archuleta for the title. And even after that, he's still been on a tear. So he's just brought a lot of eyes to the area. And he's like really the first breakout star that we've had. And then I also got to give a shout out to Solomon Renfro. He's another pro. He just fought, and I think he was the headliner for Dana White's Contender Series. He lost a split decision. I personally thought he won that fight, but he's another one that's bringing a lot of eyes to the area where I'm from.
Good stuff. You mentioned the ban in New York. It's incredible to me that as late as 2016 in the city where Madison Square Garden is based, that MMA fighting was banned. Obviously, the first UFC event there was the McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez, which was a huge event. But go on. Sorry, I was going to say it was. Yeah, it's mad to me, Danny. Obviously, Danny, back in the day, you were sort of in a time in the UK. When you were fighting, where there was a lot of places, even in the UK, where they didn't really want MMA fights and events being put on. And it was, you've talked about your difficulty in being able to find fighters to go up against. Is that still quite incredible that in 2016, New York, of all cities in the world, was still not on board with MMA? It's quite...
Yeah, that is... that is quite surprising. Whether it's because, boxing was still trying to have its last stand at staying more relevant than MMA. I don't know. Could have been down to that. But yeah, I remember times, I've been through obviously a lot of changes throughout my career, and then beyond my career, things have gone on to another level of acceptance, hasn't it, over this side of things in Europe. But it's crazy to think that France, being such a modernized country, have only just legalized MMA a year or
That
so
was
ago.
really recent, wasn't it? Like
Yeah. I mean, that's just craziness to think that a country as westernized as France has only just legalized it. But I actually did a documentary for Channel 4. It was called Matter of Fact. And on the documentary, obviously, I was all for it. And it was about starting off my career. They followed my fight camp to, have my first outing. And you kind of had, two sides of the story, and a lot of people that were linked in with councils and stuff like that when those being interviewed, they described it as cockfighting. They really just didn't understand what MMA was all about, and they back then they described it as cage fighting, and they didn't describe it as MMA. And and as I like to always correct them, that this is mixed martial arts, it's MMA, it's not really cage fighting. It's quite often actually back then in the UK it was done in a ring. But a lot of people described it as, like I say, as cockfighting. They'd rather stick hot needles in their eyes. I remember one of them said. But look, it was just an uneducated crowd. I mean, people are so much more educated now, and MMA is on the push of advancement in terms of how many people watch it across the globe. And I think that increase is going to continue into the coming decades. And I wouldn't be surprised if this will end up being the biggest combat sport in the world and take over boxing at some point. But boxing is always obviously going to be there. But I think MMA, it's going to end up taking the attention of the world eventually. I'm sure of that.
Yeah, I'm convinced of that. I think just the way sport has moved on and evolves generally, it makes sense that the thing like MMA just offers a different level of strategy and also explosive action. And I just think on the whole, eventually, it will overtake boxing fully, but which is an interesting. I think we'll put that question to Graham a little bit later on as well. I think that's an interesting question to pose. But also, with back on the France thing, I wonder if Francis Ngannou hadn't become a heavyweight title contender, if the ban would have been lifted, because from what I remember, he had quite a big impact on that ban being lifted, and because the UFC obviously wanted to showcase him in that area of the world and go and take him around and do a little tour and all that sort of stuff. And he wasn't. It's difficult to do that if the sport that you're the champion of is banned in that country. I might be wrong on that, but I'm sure that the UFC and he had quite a say in it. But yeah, it's interesting in there. There was another question I wanted to put to Josh, which I found really interesting. There it was. Reese says, Josh, he says, happy Thanksgiving for this week, Josh. Does that affect your training, or do you allow yourself to binge with a day of food, or are you always on a strict diet?
It's actually a fantastic question. So when I'm training, I'm on a pretty strict diet. But luckily, I just came off of that fight, so I have I have about a 2-3 week period in between my next camp to where I don't get crazy with the food, but I am going to enjoy Thanksgiving, and then we do have Christmas about a month later, where that's a nice feast. So I'm going to enjoy that, and then I'll have roughly 7 weeks to just lose the extra pound or two I put on from those holidays before my next fight. So, and it actually lines up great because I'm currently working with a personal trainer. I'm looking to add a little bit more muscle to my frame because I make 135 relatively easy. So I want to add a little bit more strength. So eating the surplus of calories right now is good for me.
Stuff. I like it. It's are you looking to get an MMA fight in now anytime soon, or it'll be sort of early next year sometime?
Yeah, I'm in talks with another MMA fight lined up for January 29th. It's going to be in my hometown, Buffalo, New York. It's going to be for a new promotion. It's going to be called For Fighting. We're just trying to find an opponent right now. Got a few offers out there. Just got waiting for somebody to accept it. That'll be my next one. And I do plan, like I said, having a pretty active 2022. So I'm looking to just take whatever fight I can get whenever, as long as I'm healthy. I'm looking to do it. Like I said, I want to go pro by the end of 2022, so got to be active.
Yeah. So Jordan Vucenic, as I mentioned, featherweight champion of Cage Warriors, says, what weight do you normally walk around at if you fight at 135 pounds?
If I'm coming where I'm not training too hard, which is rare nowadays, I walk around about 150 pounds. If I'm, in shape, training, 145.
Good
So it's
stuff.
about 10-pound cut. I try to diet down to 140, and then I cut the last 5.
Do you so what's it like with the amateur scene, or for you personally? Have you got a team and a dietitian and people like that to help you with the weight cut, or is it kind of all on you and your coach?
A lot of the weight cuts on me, but I have no problem with that. I wrestled in middle school and high school, so I was always good at cutting weight. I learned how to do that through wrestling. So when I started fighting, I just kind of applied the same tactics what I did in wrestling with MMA. If I ever had any issues, my coach would help me out. He's giving me tips and stuff, but for the most part, I get that down myself. And then when I went to college in the States, and I took a lot of nutrition classes and stuff. So as far as my diet, I do a lot of that myself. I do work with a personal trainer for my strength and conditioning. And as I progress through the ranks and stuff, and grow as a fighter, I'm looking to add those people to my team.
Good stuff. I like it. And then an opposite question from Gaz, who says, where's the best place to get buffalo wings in Buffalo?
Oh, that's a great question. So I personally like Duff's Famous Wings, just because I like the size of them. They have 1,000 different sauces. They're juicy. They taste really good. But if close to my house, Barbell is a place. A lot of the Buffalo Bills, a New York American football team, they love going there. They have fantastic wings. They're just a little bit too. I wouldn't say small, but Duff's has like jumbo ones, so I like that. I like a lot of meat on the bone. But both places are fantastic.
Excellent. I like it. Buffalo wings too spicy for me, I gotta say. What about you, Danny? You have a bit of buffalo wings, mate?
Oh, I'll definitely try a bit of buffalo wings. I like my food spicy.
Yeah,
so, I'd definitely give them a whirl.
My excuse is I have Crohn's disease, so I can't have something too spicy. However, I've had Taco Bell now 4 times in the last week, so that's probably not good for it either. But it's because it was my birthday, wasn't it, last week, and I discovered that there was a Taco Bell drive-through like 5 minutes from my house, and I just can't stop going there and trying different stuff.
It'd be a bad habit. Break that.
Yeah, I can't help it. It's just so good. It's so nice, and it's the only place where you can get like that type of like tacos or Mexican food anywhere, like to take away around by me. So yeah, I'm gonna have to break that habit at some point, but not anytime soon. Rob Boyle Josh wants to know if you prefer AEW or WWE.
I grew up watching WWE, so I'm a little biased there. Now, I haven't watched a lot of AEW just because I'm training a lot, but back in my WWE days, Jeff Hardy was 100% my favorite wrestler, and then when he got phased out, that's kind of when I stopped watching it. So I'm a WWE guy just because of those early to mid-2000s. The era was fantastic.
There we go.
Yeah. Is it still as popular now? Because I remember like in the 80s and 90s, it just seemed massive. Mm-hmm. Has it still got the same sort of following as it did?
Yeah, I think so. Wrestling fans, like I said, I just don't watch a lot of TV, so it's tough for me to follow it. If I had the time, I absolutely would. I like the storylines, but it's pretty popular out here. When they have events in the area, everybody goes.
Yeah, I was going to say they get millions and millions of TV viewers every week. It's like a $1 billion company now. Like it's unreal.
They're out here too.
Yeah, because I was wondering, with the advancement of viewership on MMA and being that it's obviously a real thing, as we know, WWE and all the shows alike are very scripted. They have some themes and storylines that go along with it, but it's all scripted stuff. But it just surprises me that MMA is so raw and so real, and then obviously you got WWE, which is very flamboyant and very fake. But it's entertainment, right? But I'm just surprised that it still has such a huge following.
Yeah, me too. Like, especially with the adults. Like, I can understand the children watching and stuff, but there's a lot of adults in the States that love it. The storylines are great, but I don't know. Like, people just like watching it.
Yeah.
It's just
And then
it's entertainment, and it's and if you think like people really get into the big MMA and boxing fights when you've got a really good promo guy or a really good talker, or there's a bit of animosity between the fighters, they're the fights which really kind of sell the pay-per-views and people get really into it, and you'll see the big crowds at the press conferences and things like that. I think it's kind of just that, but obviously in MMA it's real and boxing, whereas in the wrestling is preconceived and organized, but people enjoy the kind of the animosity, I guess, and the confrontation, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you're old enough, Si, to just about remember the British wrestling we used to have with Big Daddy, Giant A-Stacks, and people like that. Do you remember watching that?
Yeah,
I used to love that as a kid. Yeah, I used to love it. And I think Giant Haystacks went out to America to do some performance. I don't know whether it was WWE itself, but he went out there and did do a few bouts. But I think he might have gone under a different name. But yeah, it's it's still entertainment, isn't it? It's still classed as a combat sport. I mean, crikey, the scary thing is, as much as it's all scripted, you hear horror stories about the injuries that they go through. I mean, they're pushing. These are big men and women, really, really large and unusually, stacked individuals, and to throw themselves around on each other the way they do, I'm not surprised they got the injuries they get. But you would envisage that the real sport of MMA would be carrying the injuries, but it doesn't in the same way that you hear about in WWE. Yeah, I mean, you've had fatalities, haven't you?
I got a few friends who are wrestlers, mate, and they'll tell you it is brutal. It is you see more people getting injured. He said you've ruined it for him now. Jordan said he didn't know it wasn't real, and you've ruined it for him. There we go.
Yeah, mate, that he used to do that type of wrestling, and then he's big in jiu-jitsu. He's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, and he competes competitively. And he actually had to stop doing the wrestling because he was getting injured and he couldn't train jiu-jitsu. And he was guy. He was a high flyer, so he was always doing all that stuff in the air and getting banged up.
Yeah, it's and especially with the WWE guys, they're literally traveling like 7 days a week from town to town to put on different, because they go to a different city every Monday and every Friday for their TV shows. They're literally traveling in between, trying to find gyms in hotels, trying to eat and maintain their look, but also then taking bumps when they're it's brutal. It's just one of those things people associate it with, because it's preconceived. They associate it with it being fake and easy, but I think not many people can live that lifestyle. And you'll see some people come in from the outside, like actors or boxers or people, and they'll do that rotation of kind of traveling and wrestling and doing the shows week in, week out, and they can only do it for about sort of 3 to 4 months, and then they're out of there because they can't cope with it. Even Ronda Rousey, I think she did it for a year, and even she said like much harder than the MMA training that she used to do.
I kind of view it like gymnastics. It's brutal on your body. Just because actually getting punched in the face and stuff doesn't mean the stuff you're not doing doesn't hurt. And then, like you said, you're training like an athlete and training all the time. That's a lot of wear and tear on your body. So I respect do it because it's tough.
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. So, Josh, in terms of general MMA, and your sort of you mentioned you were a fan of MMA generally. Like, who were the guys and girls that you sort of grew up following and kind of influenced you into going where you were going?
The first person that really kind of drew me in as a fan of the sport was Clay Guida. I remember I was at my friend's and he would just put on a highlight reel of him just grappling people. And at the time, I was a wrestler in school, so I just loved loved what he was doing. His technique, everything, his chain wrestling. He was just ruthless. He had the hair. He didn't care. And I was like, man, that guy's legit. So that really kind of drew me in. And then My brother, I had a younger brother, or have a younger brother. He's about a year younger than me. He would always go to we had a video store in our town. He would go across the street and they would always give free sports movies. So we'd get every UFC pay-per-view, like the old ones on DVD, and we would just binge watch them all night. Nick Diaz, I remember my first live pay-per-view I ever saw was Nick Diaz versus Anderson Silva. The fight itself wasn't, that hot entertaining, but a lot of the antics that they were doing in the cage really drew me in. The mystique of Ronda Rousey, I followed her come up, all that really like brought me in as a fan. I was like a hardcore fan after all that.
What about like getting into martial arts and MMA and combat sports generally? Like, how old were you and how did that sort of come about? What was your journey into the sport or combat sports?
I wrestled in middle school and high school. I was always drawn in wrestling. I don't know why. I think I made the testosterone in me. I wanted to beat up people. So I wrestled. And then I went to college, and my college didn't have a wrestling team, but I wanted to stay active and do something. So I started, I did boxing for a little bit. And honestly, the place I was at wasn't the greatest. So I was like, I'm done there. And then I just Googled local MMA gyms. Tried a couple out, and then I fell in love with the jiu-jitsu aspect of it. I was pretty good at it from my wrestling. I was able to hang with blue belts almost instantly. I wasn't winning a lot, but I was able. It was competitive roles. And then told my coach I wanted to do MMA. He's like, well, you got to do some kickboxing fights first. Maybe do 3 kickboxing fights. So I was like, all right, got to learn how to do some striking. So and then it just took off from there. I went to a gym and then never left.
I like it. It does seem like a lot of the people we speak to, fighters, coaches, whatever it may be, even the announcers, the commentators, it's almost like once they get the bug, once they're in there and they're amongst it, they just get this bug and they can't stop doing it, whatever it may be. Once they're involved in combat sports and martial arts, particularly, it's very difficult to step away from it. And obviously that's great news for all of us. Danny, with you, do you see many sort of people come in to the gym, like beginners come in and then kind of try it and leave? Or do you find a lot of them, once they get the bug, they're in?
Yeah,
in different degrees, obviously, where not everyone's going to train to be a professional, but just generally.
Right. Yeah, you run beginners classes, and so in that, you see a lot of people come and go. People come and have a little taster for a week, or sometimes just for one session. You don't see them again. But that said, you do get numbers that stick and that catch on, and some of those go on to have some form of amateur career, and some of them go on to be pros. Like we were talking about earlier, you get a lot of amateurs, and you get a few pros and a few that stand out, but they're few and far between in the collective total numbers that do come through in the gym. You get some that just stay domestic. You get some that never compete at all. I'd say most don't compete. But that's the way we run things there. You will get gyms that specify just on fighters alone, and I get that, but we're trying to run a business and in a way that the bulk of the numbers that don't ever compete uphold financially the place to therefore support and push forward amateurs to have potential pro careers. So I'd say over 90%, maybe 95% of all that comes through probably won't compete in any way, shape or form. You'll probably get about 4% that will compete at amateur, and you get that 1% that will break through into the pros and make something of themselves. But the numbers are surprisingly small in the total of numbers that come through the door.
It's interesting. I find it really interesting. What about you, Josh? Like, do you see a lot of people from the local area sort of coming in and trying martial arts and MMA and things like that because of the amount which is on TV and the big names and stuff like that? Or is it still relatively small in terms of what people will, like the average person will sort of come and do?
Well, it's pretty similar like what he was saying. Now that it's been about 7 years or 5 years since it's been legalized. So now we have a lot of different gyms in the area now. Before there was really only one. So there's a lot of people that come through and want to try it out. But like he's saying, you're going to have about 95% of people come through. Not a lot of them stick with it because it is, it's tough. It's physically demanding. And then on top of that, you got to be consistent at it. There's also a price to it too. So a lot of people come try it out. They'll stick with it for a couple months and then you won't see them again. Some might come back, and then you got about 20% that stay and do it. But eventually, within a couple of years, they'll phase out. There's very, very few people that I see that stick with it for most of their life.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I do find it really interesting. Go on, Dan.
Yeah, I've got Josh, you said several times about you do wrestling, which is, from a UK perspective, we sort of understand you will do it through your high school. And so you've got to have some form of exposure to wrestling, which I think is an absolute great thing. I really do. But coming from more of a wrestling perspective, as more of a specialist, if you will, what do you think the defining difference is in the wrestling style of MMA regards the Americans over the Russians? Because the Russians really have got some successes, or huge amount of success in terms of how they're getting people down. They do seem to be either chaining differently, approaching the wrestling different. Can you see any defining difference that you would recognize and feel that they're doing something over how the Americans are doing it?
I believe it's the training. So I do have my wrestling coach. His son he trains with the U.S. Olympic team, and he's always bringing and talking about different ways of why the Russians are better wrestlers than the Americans with their training stuff, because he's trying to be at the forefront and research all this. And the way he explains it to me is just the way they train. And I also believe that your upbringing has a lot to do with it. Like traditionally, the Russians, they're kind of they're harder on their athletes and stuff, and the Americans are really not. So I just think it's like a mentality type thing and just a work ethic type thing. Really, I do think that the Americans, eventually, they'll polish up what they're doing to make them more competitive in the MMA scene with it. So I do think in a couple of years it is going to even out a little bit. But I just think like the way that they're doing it over in Russia right now is just more effective.
Yeah.
Interesting. What are the high school wrestling coaches in the US like these days? Are they quite hard on the athletes and the kids, or is it a bit more laid back than perhaps what we'd see on maybe like a movie or a TV show and things like that, where sometimes they can be quite brutal and quite hard on the footballers, the wrestlers, things like this?
Well, luckily I've had a few coaches growing up. And I've had some coaches that literally coach just because they want a paycheck and they don't really care. And, practice is dodgeball and everything else. And I've had some other coaches that are like, nose in the mat, we're running laps, we're doing takedowns until you guys puke. So I think it really kind of depends where you go to school, and also like what you're trying to accomplish as a wrestler. If you want to be a really nice high level wrestler, you'll probably go to a private school and you'll have a coach that'll work you like a professional athlete. If you're just at a public school and you're like, I want to join a wrestling team, you might have a coach that's going to make it more of a fun experience for you, so you keep coming back and wanting to be on the team. So I think it really kind of depends on just what school you go to. But I think traditionally more, especially with the culture we have in the United States, I think it's going to be a little bit more geared towards more, I don't know, just a little less, you screwed up, got to do 50 push-ups. Like they don't believe really in corporal punishment and stuff over here anymore. So it's kind of like, I think it's going to be a little, I'm trying to think of a way to phrase it.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
What about you? Do you feel like you react better to a coach who maybe is quite sort of harsh and critical of you, maybe, or do you react better to someone who maybe puts their arm around you a bit and kind of talks to you and encourages you that way?
No, I need somebody that's going to be straight with me. I got thick skin, it doesn't upset me. I want to be a high level professional fighter. I need someone to be real with me. Like, if I'm doing something wrong, you'd be like, yo, you got to fix that shit right now. Or, hey, hustle, you're not working hard enough. Or, hey, you're down 2 rounds to 1. Go out there and go freaking get that finish. Otherwise, you're going to lose. I need someone to be real with me and hard. But I also kind of need, like, the encouragement's nice too. So, but traditionally, I think I'm more effective when someone's hard on me, because it really kind of gets my gears going a little bit.
What about you, Dan? What were you like? Like, were you better if someone was giving you a bit of grief, or did you prefer someone to give you a bit of a pep talk?
I was brought up in traditional martial arts, and as it was back then, you got to remember I'm sort of heading towards the big 5-0, headed towards that sort of age bracket. So I started out in Taekwondo with my brother. Yeah, it's coming around quick. And so I started out in Taekwondo, and that's very, strict in its format. If you was late, you either wasn't allowed to, if you was really late, you just wasn't allowed to jump on, and participate at all. But if you was even just a minute late, you got given exercises and in front of the class where everyone watches you and stuff like that. So so I always had a lot of respect for whoever's my coach and conducted myself really, really well. But in terms of like personalities towards me for my training, I definitely like straight talking coaches. I'm very, very same as you, Josh, in that I think I've got thick skin. But I never, to be honest, I didn't even need to have thick skin in terms of like trying to tell me that this ain't right and this has got to be better, because, well, that's why I was doing it. I wanted to be the best that I can be. Mm-hmm. And numerous times over my career, I did change coaches because I felt like I either outgrew them in terms of what they had to show me, or outgrew them in state of mind, and felt like I needed to move on to, through my maturity, mm-hmm. And move on to a coach with more wisdom, if you will. Certainly wisdom, something that's really touched me with some of the coach exposure that I've had. Mm-hmm. So straight talking. And listen, if you're going to be a successful coach in creating successful competitors, you got to be straight talking. It's just that more than ever before, and I'm sure other coaches would agree with this, you're getting more offended students, and it's all to with either how that being brought up or through their schooling. But they're so easily offended, and they take the critique of their technique or their game as criticism. Mm-hmm. And really, you've got to be criticized to advance your weaknesses, right, and make them not weaknesses anymore. So that's some of the battle I had with some students, and the amount of students that do argue back is just shocking. Even things as in deciding whether they go pro or not. And I'm like, look, stay amateur. And they're like, well, no, but so-and-so said, it's just unbelievable. But, it's all different personalities you have to deal with as a coach. But I get around it the best way I can. I'm lucky in that we've got other coaches there, and we initially sit on the same page as each other. We really are a good, close-knit family, if you want to call it that, at our gym. And all the coaches, the striking coaches, and me as the jiu-jitsu coach and MMA coach, we all work very, very well collectively together. And so, when push comes to shove, sometimes with some of the awkward students, we kind of have to get together a little bit, and we all get on the same page and trying to redirect some of the attitude of students. But it's an ongoing battle. It really is.
Yes, it's a good insight, mate. I like that. Someone just, Reese just asked Danny very quickly before we go back to Josh. I want to just put this question to you. He said, have you ever had anyone come into the gym who were very naturally gifted, but they just didn't want to fight competitively?
Yeah, absolutely. You do get some natural talents, and now normally the laziest ones are the ones that are easiest distracted with things that go on outside the gym. Absolute nightmare, because as a coach, you generally like to feel you get a good idea, a good flavor of whether someone's got the ability to make something of themselves or not. And those ones with that natural ability, they get distracted. With young men, they get distracted by girls when they reach sort of like 16 years old. They go missing for a few months, or if they've had an argument with the missus, they come into training and are not really there with their minds. They just let outside influences affect them so easily. Not very often you get someone that conducts themselves properly outside the gym in a way that it don't affect them in the gym. Yeah, it's just part of the equation you have to deal with.
Yeah.
But talented people, the nightmare, the hardest ones to work with, funny enough. Yeah, it's so frustrating and annoying. Really is annoying.
I've seen that. I've had some people come through the gym that have amazing talent, and you're just like, oh, where'd you go? Oh, there was a party.
Yeah.
Couldn't be me.
Yeah.
Josh, couple of questions to finish off from the people, and then we'll go to the one-word game to finish you off. But Rob wants to know, have you ever been to Wales, the best country in the world, or the UK generally?
I have not, but that is somewhere I'm looking to actually go in 2022. I'm getting my passport, and I want to travel. I want to see the world, and more importantly, I want to train. I want to see other areas in the world and how they train, what they do, and just absorb all that knowledge and culture. So, in the next year and two, I plan on traveling. I'm definitely going out to the UK. That's one of my first places I want to go.
And Josh, I expect you to step foot in our gym, the BST Academy at Northampton. If you can get over that way, we'll make sure you're really welcome. And but we have a really incredible facility. I know out in America, I've seen some amazing facilities out there, and I've seen places out in Japan. I know a little bit about how other places train and what have you. And I know America's got some of the best places to train in the world. But our gym is one of the biggest in the UK and indeed probably in Europe. I think you'd be really impressed with what we have out here.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come down there and check out whatever you guys, have. And, I would love to work with you, especially, someone like you, the talent you have. I'd be like a sponge in your area.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Jordan says, Danny told me off when I first came to his gym.
I did. Told him off proper. But now he tells me off when I do things wrong.
Sometimes it's got to be like that. People have and people will tell you off.
Gaz says, best combat sports show in the UK, criminally underrated. I appreciate that, Gaz. Thank you very much, my friend. Reese says, Danny, can you tell me, when can you tell when someone new comes in, who's going to stick at it and who's not going to?
You do get a general idea of personalities. It's normally the ones that talk the most end up don't sticking at it or don't do what they're talking about doing. So I get these young lads and they train for a few weeks and then they say they want to have a fight at a certain time. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And then they promise to do big things. I say, and now I've learned to say to them, I say, listen, don't tell me about it. Just do it. And if I see it, I'll back you up all the way. But talking it's just going to put you under pressure. And I've heard it all before. So action speaks louder than words is a term that gets used a lot with these young lads and young girls that come through.
There we go. Gaz says, Josh, he wants to know, do you want to be in 5 years' time?
5 years, I want to be fighting for a major organization, hopefully contending for a belt.
Good stuff. And then to finish us off, we'll do the one-word game with Josh Reichardt. So, Josh, I'm going to give you 8 names from the world of combat sports. You just say the first thing which comes to mind when you hear that name. So the first name on the list is Dana White.
Uncle Dana.
Conor McGregor.
Money.
Paddy the Baddie.
Hilarious.
Gary Toonan.
Savage Grappler.
Colby Covington.
Annoying.
Jake Paul.
Not a fighter.
Canelo Alvarez.
The current best boxer of all time.
And Tyson Fury.
Role model.
There we go. Good stuff.
Really good. He's good at it when he quick fire.
That's the best one, yeah. That's what
That's the fastest anyone's ever gone through it.
There your face. Sorry.
Yeah, there we go. That's what I like. So, Josh, look, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you join us, and really appreciate you coming on. And I'm sure we'll get you back on again at some point. And we'll certainly look out. Let us know when you get that fight sorted for January, and we'll do a little bit of a share and stuff. And we'll certainly be looking out for your name. And we'll get you back on in the next year sometime as well. But thanks
guys,
for joining us.
Yep, pleasure. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation, guys.
Well done, Josh. Good luck, buddy.
Everybody in the UK.
There we go. Cheers, mate. So, Danny Batten, Josh. So, just me and you for a couple of minutes, my friend. Another interesting conversation with a name for the world of combat sports. And I saw a couple of comments. People were interested in kind of the look on to the US amateur scene as opposed to the UK amateur scene, which is obviously slightly different. But what we will do, I think, mate, is just while we await our next guest, is we're going to talk a little bit about Manscaped and support to you for the Danny Batten Fight Show this evening, brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best men's below-the-waist grooming champions of the world. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped just launched their 4th generation lawnmower 4.0 all across Europe and worldwide. You heard that right. It's the 4.0. You can join over 4 million men and women worldwide who trust Manscaped. And with this exclusive offer for you, we have 20% off and free worldwide shipping. All you have to do is use the code FIGHTSHOW at manscaped.com, and that will give you 20% off and free worldwide shipping. We've talked about it a lot, mate, and I'm not afraid to keep talking about it. The quality of these products has been just simply absolutely sensational. I trimmed the edges of my beard again using the Lawnmower 4.0. I really like it because the torch just lets me do the edges and stuff nicely. I don't like to be clean shaven, so I like to sort of do the edges and all that sort of jargon underneath. And of course, you can use it for anything. You can shave anything you like. You can shave your legs, you can shave your chest, you can shave anything you like. It's time to kill two birds with one stone, one trimmer, should I say. Get yourself and your lady a gift. I'm talking the Manscaped Performance Package 4.0. And in that package, you get one of these with a stand, a charger, and then you get the ball toner and the ball deodorant, all anti-chafing, which is remarkably good for people involved in sports, in gyms, in grappling, things like that, jiu-jitsu. That's going to really help that out. And it's superb stuff. It's also waterproof, which is magnificent if you want to use it in the shower. And then you've got things like the hygiene bundle, which comes with a pair of Manscaped anti-chafing boxer shorts. That is the perfect wrapping for your Christmas presents. The Manscaped Performance Package, as well as you can have the new refined cologne. It offers a light yet masculine, pleasing fragrance will leave your lady on the naughty list this year. And it's made from hypoallergenic ingredients that are vegan, cruelty-free, dye-free, and paraben-free. 'Tis the season to load up on Manscaped products. So get yourself, your dad, your brother, your friends, your wife, your mother, whatever you want. The best gift of all, manscaped.com. Get 20% off, free shipping with this unique code FIGHTSHOW at manscaped.com. I urge you to support our brand partners as much as you support our shows. It really helps us out. And like I say, I cannot speak highly enough of their products. But so Graham will be joining us in just a second, my friend. But for maybe some people who don't know, Graham Boylan, president of Cage Warriors, is effectively the Dana White of the UK. Is a very big guest. Very, very happy to have him on board and join us this evening. We've got Cage Warriors Double Trouble in just a couple of weeks. And there's some massive fights on that card. So that's going to be really interesting to hear him talk about that. And it's going to be an interesting one, mate.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having him on. I mean, I've seen him in person, and he probably doesn't remember, but nodding and shaking his hand on numerous occasions when Jordan was fighting on there. But he's always obviously a super busy guy, so it's always been quite fleeting. But to be sat and chatting to him on the screen, so to speak, will be great. I also remember it'd be interesting to ask him. One of the questions I want to ask him is whether he remembers Dougie Truman, or whether he had any direct contact with Dougie Truman, who started out Cage Warriors, who in my early years and as champion of Cage Warriors was dealing mainly with this Dougie Truman. Whether they've got any. I'm kind of curious to know, because I got on really, really well with Dougie. Obviously, like I say, Graham's been an extremely busy guy, and I'm a busy guy in the coaching aspects these days. So, to sit down and talk to each other is something that we've not had the privilege of doing yet, but it'd be great to talk to him.
Indeed. So I'm delighted to welcome Cage Warriors president, Mr. Graham Boylan, to the show. How are you, Graham?
Gentlemen, how are you? I'm pretty tired.
Yeah, good.
I'm just off a flight from New York, so I'm kind of fighting to keep my eyes open.
Jet lagged. So yeah, it's a very big month for Cage Warriors. It feels like we say that every couple of weeks these days. You've blessed us with some massive shows during the COVID era. After telling us there was no more trilogies, you then announced a Double Trouble show as straight after.
Yeah, the guys in the office come up with all these names, man. I'm just the one sitting on the side causing havoc, making them do these shows. So we're happy to keep the scene moving during the pandemic as such, but to actually get all the fighters active and keep them moving when the whole country was shut down is something we're very proud of.
Yeah, it was a really difficult period for sport generally, I think, but particularly for MMA, because obviously there was no amateur fights during that time, and there was in the UK it was pretty much Cage Warriors, and that was it. So from a fan's point of view, we were very happy to see those Cage Warriors shows, but it wasn't. What I found even more pleasing was that every single trilogy show was not just jam-packed on paper where the fights looked good. We were talking to Brad Wharton, the Cage Warriors commentator, a few weeks back, and we couldn't even think of one fight which was kind of under-delivered. Like every single fight from the prelims to the main event on every trilogy was just incredible. As the president, that's got to please you.
Yeah, and we had these conversations at each trilogy. We had 5 of them. And I think it was the atmosphere of everybody being cooped up in a hotel for a week. You had 60-something fighters, 60-odd coaches, you had cornermen. You had more or less the entire MMA scene in one hotel, under one roof for a week. And I think that atmosphere and having the training rooms in the hotel, I think the atmosphere of that brought out the best in everybody, and everybody felt they needed to step up. And every fighter delivered, like you said, from the prelims to the main event and the main cards on all 3 nights. Every person on those shows delivered. There was fight of the nights in nearly every prelim there, every main card. You could have given 3 or 4 fight of the nights in them. But I honestly believe it was the atmosphere and the pressure cooker of the hotel, where you had the entire scene under one roof for a week, made them all step up.
Yeah, and there was there ever any sort of tense moments between the fighters? Like we've heard of a couple. We saw Oban and one of the Figlak brothers had a bit of a sort of confrontation the one time, but is that something that you sort of had to keep an eye on as the sort of the big boss, as you've got all these fighters who are about to go to war, and some of them have got a bit of animosity?
Yeah, I don't think it was something that we had to watch, to be honest. I mean, they're professional guys. Obviously, there's some bad blood between certain camps, certain fighters, but you know, they all knew what training rooms they had. They all knew what times they could use the changing rooms. They stayed away from each other. I mean, when you got that many people in one hotel, we practically took over hotels because there was nobody else in them. And we had to do, for the bubbles that we were doing for the government, for the DCMS, that we had to hire practically the whole hotel. Or if there was any other kind of bookings within that hotel, we had to completely close off our areas to any other people in that hotel. There was a few occasions where I got stuck in a lift, probably once a day, where you'd end up in the lift with 2 guys who were fighting each other, and the lift wasn't that big. And you're kind of standing in the middle, and it's like, well, this is fucking awkward, isn't it? You're standing in the middle of red and the blue corner. There's only 4 of you in the lift. There's me, the 2 fighters, and the 2 corner team, and it's like no one's talking to each other. So it's kind of, well, we'll just stay silent till the lift stops then. Yeah, thank God nobody decided to actually get feisty with each other in that lift, because it would have been a telephone box fight.
It's a small area, that is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I do want to sort of jump around a little bit, but with the Double Trouble card coming up, The one fight, or one of the fights, should I say, which is really kind of captivated attention with our viewers and with us, is Sam Creasy versus Luke Shanks. It's two fighters which Danny knows very well. We've had on the show a couple of times, both of them. They had a great fight to start. And then after the fight, there was this sort of Luke was putting up some posts and kind of indicating that he felt that Sam had tapped and stuff like that. Was the decision to make a rematch around that, or was it just because it was such a good, close fight?
No, it was around the controversy. We wouldn't just put on a rematch because it was a close fight. We've had plenty of close fights where we could do a rematch. We could probably sit here and go through a whole show and still keep going of great fights that we could do a rematch on. This rematch is happening because of the controversy that happened within the fight. And it brings us back to the good old golden question within the sport. There is no commission to sanction all these things. There is no appeal system to actually go at it with a committee as such if you're not happy with something. And we're not going to open a can of worms on that. We're not going to say we're going to act like God when it comes to these decisions. It was there were twos and fours and pros and cons, and there was a lot of moving parts in that decision. And at the end of the day, we felt the fairest thing to do was to let things stand. Things didn't happen when they should have happened in a live scenario. So the fairest thing to do was to rematch them immediately. And to be fair to Sam Creasy, he was the one that said, I want a rematch ASAP. I want this fight. I'm not going to have this belt around my waist with any kind of black mark on it. I want it done right. Luke, there's three guys in that cage, and I believe all three guys are to blame. That's where I'm going with this. There's no one person to blame here. There was two fighters. There was a referee. Something happened. One person says a guy tapped. The guy who says he didn't tap. Both fighters carried on at that given moment and acted like there was nothing happened and carried on the fight for another 3 or 4 rounds. Referee didn't step in. So I just feel the easiest thing to do here, and without opening up a can of worms, of giving every fighter on the roster the opportunity to come back after every fight that happens and claim some kind of appeal system with us, was just to give them an immediate rematch, because there were twos and fours for every person in that octagon on that night. There was pros and cons for the ref, there was pros and cons for Shanks, and there was pros and cons for Creasy. So the fairest thing to do is to rematch it.
Yeah, it's a very it's a difficult situation, and I think that says a lot, Danny, about Sam as a character. That he wanted the rematch. He didn't want any kind of question about his legitimacy as a champion. And obviously, if Luke feels that there was a tap there, he's obviously going to want another shot at it. So it does make sense. It's and obviously Sam, having missed out on the title previously, I would imagine that makes him feel even more so that he doesn't want to kind of have that dark mark on his reign.
Yeah, Sam's a real good guy and a true martial artist in every sense of the word. And I really honestly believe with this situation. I've seen him numerous times since he was training at our place just the other day. And I haven't even bothered discussing it with him because I just want to have my take on it. I just don't dive into it much. I think what happened on my personal way of thinking, in that how I know Luke and how I know Sam, I think it was a tap. I think it was an instinctual tap. I don't think he was in any discomfort. I just think it's a reactive tap, partially because these two have done many, many rounds with each other. They've both tapped each other out. They've both sparred many rounds of MMA, punching and kicking and kneeing each other. And I think it was almost an instinctual training mechanism and where that tap led. And I think the reason why they both carried on is because of that sort of weird mindset that they both had with each other. So I totally agree with Graham. I've not had it explained to me or that viewpoint put to me, Graham, the way you did, in that they was all to blame. But you're absolutely right. I think normally when people will say, well, it's the ref's fault. But you're right. They all were to blame in some way. But going back to what I wanted to make as a point regarding Sam, I think he would have had no memory of tapping, because I think it was reactive. I think the fight just carried on, and I think it was straight out of his head. I'm sure he would have no recollection of actually tapping. This man is honest through to the bone. He really, really is. For Shanks, I've got a lot of respect for Shanks. As you know, I started off a big portion of his career. Love the guy to bits. Comes with his problems regards his personality and training, and trying to keep him straight-laced and being where he should be regards his training. But, you know, this man's honourable as well. But I think the great situation about this, and what makes it easy for Graham, is that they both respect each other because of the training history they've had together. They know what each other are about. They know they're both, wanting the same thing in the cleanest way possible. And so I'm not surprised at all that Sam was saying to Graham, hey, look, let's get this back on. I want to take this belt in a clean fashion. I can't wait to see this fight again. I think it was great first time around. I think it's going to be even better second time around. Keep up the good work, Graham, because you're putting on some amazing bouts. And, you know, someone that don't get mentioned enough, when we have mentioned it, Si, is Ian Dean. You know, doesn't he do a great job in matching up these fights? I mean, he's been around, since the Dougie Truman days, and he's stuck with it. He's still there doing the same job, and he's got so much history with the sport. He really knows the sport very, very well. What's your thoughts on Ian Dean?
He became part of the furniture a long time ago in Cage Warriors, a bit like you, Danny. You practically grew up in Cage Warriors as well.
That's it.
He's very passionate in what he does, and he cares extremely, extremely highly of the fighters. And we would have arguments matching fights, and the arguments that we'd have matching fights is because of my development brain with some of the guys, and he would care so much for some of the guys. He'd want to hold certain guys back or not push them too quick, or he's been in the game a long time. And his network of connections throughout Europe stands to him in the actual respect that he has through fighters, through gyms, through coaches and managers. You know, he's an unsung hero for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like I said, these trilogy cards have almost changed the game in many ways because they've been so good. Does that put more pressure on yourself and Ian Dean to continue to put these cards on at such a high level, or is it just a case of you're always looking to, improve and get better as time goes on anyway? Because obviously, like we said, every single trilogy card has been so individually special, but also collectively they've been the only MMA that we've been able to watch from a UK point of view.
Yeah. I mean, at one point, Cage Warriors Trilogy Series, it was the only live sport on TV.
Yeah.
At one point, at the beginning. And we put so much work into getting clearance to get that done. The idea behind the trilogy was we could have just done one show. I mean, we could have done one show a month. But the idea behind the trilogy was there was no way I was doing one show and the entire roster is sitting out. How do we pick 20 guys out of the entire roster and say, right, you're the ones that are going to be able to go training. You're the ones we're going to give a letter to be able to go to your gym with your coaches to say that you are approved to train and you are approved to compete on Cage Warriors. How do we pick 20 guys out of 140 plus roster? So it was quite simply, we're going to build a show and we're going to leave the setup in the arena for 3 days. And we're going to get as many fights for the guys who want to fight on that card. So that was the thinking from when the lockdown all started. I kind of locked myself in my office for 4 days and I was just brainstorming and racking my head how I could get around keeping the guys busy, keeping the show going, And that was what we came up with. The trilogy series was born, you know, get as many fights as we can in 3 days, get the setup in, get everybody into a hotel. We got all government signed off, and, you know, it worked. And every person stepped up. It didn't benefit some guys because some guys didn't quite get the training they needed to when the gyms were closed and they couldn't get to the gyms, they couldn't get training partners. But other guys excelled and they turned their careers around. Matt Bonner being one of them. Matt Bonner went in when the trilogy series kicked off. He was on almost an even record. We finished, the trilogy series is finished now. Matt Bonner is a middleweight world champion. You know, beat everybody we put in front of him. You know, so I said, some guys really reacted and done well during that time, and then other guys just couldn't get their head around training. They just couldn't get their heads get their head into the space of this is the new world we're in. You're gonna have to go to the gym with just 2 or 3 guys because that's all you're allowed to go to the gym with. Because there was councils knocking on doors, there was police going to gyms, shutting them down. You know, and it messed with some guys' heads. So our roster of 100+ people came down to about 60 or 70 of people who actually wanted to fight during that time. Other people are like, I'm not doing anything, I'm done. I'm waiting until gyms are open and I can actually proper camping. So, yeah.
It's
we're happy what we did, and we're happy we kept all our fighters busy.
Yeah, it's been a wild, strange and worrying time for everyone. I think it's become a way of life now, hasn't it? And I am kind of interested where you said about like you were brainstorming ideas about, you know, how you could get fights on and what sort of cards you could put on. Was there any ideas that you could tell us about which kind of obviously didn't come to fruition that were on the table? Did you ever think of taking it outside the UK, like a Fight Island type thing?
So at the start of the pandemic, when it all started kicking off, I was actually looking to try and take a building on and create a studio within the building. So create a kind of a UK version of the Apex. And we were actually looking to try and get our own kit rather than renting stuff in. We were actually doing costings on buying a lighting rig, setting the cage up full time, and actually doing a show every Friday night. That was an initial plan, was to, if I could find the right building and set it up, all we needed was a big enough space to actually make a black box, basically. Put a lighting up, put the octagon in, and we were gonna just bring in, 12, maybe 16 guys every Friday and put a show on once a week. But then we realized when we started contacting people saying, look, this is what we're doing. Do you want to fight? Are you sitting out? There's no big deal. Just let us know, because we're getting messages from people who are itching to fight and train, asking if we can give them a letter to go to their gym, which we did with a majority of people. So with the numbers that came back, it wasn't worth our while set up for a Friday. We were going to do a Friday fight night every Friday. The numbers weren't there to do that. So then we thought, right, well, let's just get the guys who want to fight in on one show. We spoke to the venues, and it was just cost effective for us to do one setup, keep that set up for 3 days, get the 3 shows done, get everybody a fight, and get everybody home.
Incredible stuff. Again, I apologize. I'm jumping around to all sorts of different subjects. But I was, something you said there reminded, when you said about the studio, it reminded me of the days when you were on BT Sport in the BT studio. How has it been? Do you prefer being on the UFC Fight Pass as an organization, or do you prefer it when it was on BT Sport? Obviously, they're both kind of paid subscriptions anyway. So I just wondered if there was a difference in terms of how you guys view it. BT Sport is good from a marketing point of view, because let's face it, anybody who is on UFC Fight Pass is a fight fan, right? Yeah. So your actual bubble, when it comes to the marketing point of view, is smaller than what it would be on a sports channel, even though it's a paid, it's a subscription service.
the that subscription service has rugby fans, soccer fans, wherever the sport is on BT Sports. When you're looking at Fight Pass, it's fight fans, it's MMA fans. So you're kind of, it's apples and oranges compared to trying to compare the two of them. And so for us, as long as we're being broadcasted and the guys are getting the eyeballs that they need at this level, that's my main concern in all this. It's been my go-to since I took over Cage Warriors back in 2010. And I said it to Ian when I first met Ian. I said, this is going to be a fighters organization run by a fighting mind and fighting minds to actually get this moving. And we're going to do everything we can to get these guys the exposure that they need at the level that they're at. So whether it's BT Sports or UFC Fight Pass, they both got their pros and cons.
Yeah, I think one of the things with which I think probably the Fight Pass has over BT is that you get the worldwide audience in terms of, I think it certainly feels to me, and maybe it's a bit social media as well these days, but it does feel as if the US fans are more in touch now with the UK fighters who are not in the UFC or Bellator yet, and they're kind of in the Cage Warriors, because for instance, when Paddy made his debut recently, a lot of American fans were already well aware of him, and I understand, he's a very big name, but it does feel that even Josh, the amateur fighter, which we had on just before you, he said to me before the show, like, he watches a lot of Cage Warriors on UFC Fight Pass and things like that, and obviously if you're on BT Sport, you don't get that, because it's not on in America, as far as I'm aware. Yeah. So, like you say, there's pros and cons to both. Yeah. Danny, what was the question that you wanted to ask Graham that you were just mentioning before Graham come on? I've forgotten what it was.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously started out with Dougie Truman. I think the last ever fight I had, I think you had just taken it over, I believe, in 2010, because you said 2010, that's when I had my last fight. Then I chose to retire after that. Did you have any dealings with Dougie? Or because when you took it over, who is it you actually took it over from? Because it did change hands, didn't it?
Yeah, so we took it over from different guys. Dougie, I didn't have much dealings with Dougie. I met Dougie. I invited Dougie to the 100 show, where we had Dougie come cage side, and he came to watch the show. I think it was at the Forum, the Century show. And to jump back, it was Ismail Padavia was your last fight in Cage Warriors, wasn't it?
Yes, right, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that fight. Yeah. That was the first show that I did when I took it over. It was right, at Forum in Kentish Town.
That's it, yeah.
2010, yeah. That would have been September, October 2010. And we would have done the first, that would have been the first, we were doing like little shows prior to that, but that was when I rebranded everything into Cage Warriors and did the first show, Young Guns. I think it was Cage Warriors, is it 37 or 38 or something? They do all roll into one for me, But yeah, and I believe you won that fight, right? Was it
I did, yeah. I was unbeaten on Cage Warriors. Come to mention it. It's funny, me and Jordan, we're always competing with each other. It's just Jordan all over and it's me all over. And I had 4 fights in Cage Warriors and won all 4 of them. But I picked up the title on my first fight. And it's quite funny, Jordan's now had 4 fights, 4 wins. And he so wants to outdo me. And, I want him to. It'd be a great thing for him to advance on my successes. But on Jordan's watching this, no doubt he wants to probably hear us talk about him a little bit more. What do you think about Jordan as a featherweight champion?
I think he's an amazing fighter, amazing striking, solid takedown defense. I'm actually so looking forward to that fight between him and Hughes when it eventually happens. When they actually come together to unify that belt, that is going to be a big fight. Mm-hmm. And talking about competitiveness, when Hughes beat Morgan at the last trilogy series, we had Jordan cage side, and Jordan got in to the octagon and faced off against Hughes. And I was standing between them, and they were just going back and forth with each other. And Hughes said, I won that last fight. And George said, no, you didn't. I won it. I won it. You won. I won it. And they just kept saying that to each other. And then Hughes turned around and said, well, I beat you tonight. And then Jordan said, how come? I cried more than you did when you won the title. It was like, I'm standing between them. They're live on TV and they're like, I won, you won, I won, no, I won, no, I won, no, I won. And they're back and forth each other as well. I cried more than you did tonight, so I won. Like,
amazing.
The competitors, none of them would back away from each other. They were just sounding like the competitors.
But it's all done tastefully. They don't get rear up in each other's face. It's not that kind of relationship they seem to have. They leave that very much for the cage when the door shuts. But it's funny you were saying about how competitive they are, even to the smallest degree. There's a photo where they're both up on their tiptoes. So they wanted to have a picture taken together, but the one wanted to be taller than the other. So one rose a little bit, the other stretched up, and there they are standing there like two ballerinas up on their tippy toes. It's a great rivalry, and one that I think has the potential to go on even beyond cage rules, because I'm sure their careers are going to at some stage advance on. I mean, they're destined for UFC, I would suggest. And I think they'll be facing each other again in the future, because they both got that type of skill level, commitment and character about them to do so. It's just interesting to get your take.
I don't like the fact that they're so similar, and when they compete, it's going to be so fucking close. Yeah, I would not want to be a judge in any of those fights.
No, absolutely not. But Graham, I have to point out this: was you aware of the cage grab more than once in the first round when they fought each other? Did you see back? Jordan B wanted to know whether you saw that, because I think the only reason Jordan lost that first round was because he grabbed the cage when he took his legs out from him, and then he hit a switch on Jordan, actually put Jordan underneath. But he recovered it, but nevertheless threw away that first round. So as long as he don't grab any sneaky little advantages like that, but it's the desire to win, right? And you push the boundaries. If you can get away with a fence grab, you get away with it. But
it's the three of them, Jordan, Morgan, and Hughes. That division is just a shout. And you've got the love triangle right at the top. You got Morgan, Jordan, Hughes. That's just a love triangle right there, man. It's like you could go on with the three of them forever. But I think that someone that has to have a mention is really Steve Ainable. I mean, he's been around a long time. Kind of getting senior in his years, but looking better than ever. He just had another fantastic win, didn't he? He's certainly someone that could get out of the mix. I mean, when he fought with Jordan, that was no straight running affair for Jordan. He had to make adaptations for the second and third round, and he did so. I managed to pull off the win. But Steve Ainable, he can't be written off by any stretch. I think he's there chomping at either of those heels on any free. Is he coming off 4, maybe 5 wins now? I think.
Yeah, he's racking it up. He beat Tom Mearns, hadn't he? And then he had another win just recently.
What happens in these divisions is, like, we sign guys into a roster, all right, and you may have a guy who's, say, he's on a very attractive record. Maybe just hypothetically here, you've got a guy, he's 8-0 and he's fighting, he's not signed anywhere, and then we go into negotiations to bring this fighter into our roster, okay. And what happens there is they'll say, all right, we're 8-0, we want a title shot immediately. And we'll say, absolutely fucking not. It's not fair on the roster. You'll have to come in and get 1 or 2 wins first. And then you get your title shot. We would have to contract that in. Okay? So the fighter's got 5 fights. If he wins his first 2, got a guaranteed fight on his third. Yeah? And then what happens is, you have what's going on right now in the division. You've got an interim champion. You've got an actual champion who's injured. And now you've got another guy outside the two of them who's got a contract. His third fight, if he wins, is the belt as well. So now he's sitting waiting. And you can very easily end up with a backlog for that belt. So you could have another guy who's got nothing to do with contracts and title shots, but he's on five or six straight wins, impressive wins.
Yeah.
But you can't jump the queue because somebody else has a contract saying my third fight is against the champion. So we have a lot of moving parts when we've got 20 or so guys in each division, and some of them have contracted because they came into the division on a serious win streak and they have to prove themselves in the division to get that title shot. So, a lot of people don't know the amount of moving parts per fight that we have to juggle.
Right.
These talks and every fight that happens takes a long time to get together. They're not just, here, let's just do this. There's a lot goes into every little fight that you see, even the prelims.
Mm-hmm.
Graham, on that note, and also sort of going back a little bit towards the pandemic side of things, like how difficult was it to put on a show in that period in terms of getting permission and all? I'm assuming you'd have had to jump through about 1 million hoops to be able to even put on a show, let alone by the time you get to planning it and, you know, the filming and the lighting and all that side of things. Like, how difficult was it to get them up and running?
The actual show itself is the easy bit. You know, we've been doing this nearly over a decade. So a lot of the people who work in Cage Warriors, they've been with me since day one, since 2010. And I don't have to ask or query anything they would be responsible for. I always say Cage Warriors it's a strong chain, and everybody's got their link within that chain that they're responsible for. And I'm confident that the people who I have working with me have the strength in their link in their department that I don't need to worry about anything. If I do hear from them, it's a problem. If I don't hear from them, then we just turn up and show day and do it. The biggest challenge that we had was getting the hotels on site to actually allow us to segregate their hotel and get them in place so that we could actually keep a bubble format within the hotels. The first show, I think it was March 2020, when the country went into lockdown. Everybody was like, everything was getting cancelled left, right, and center. And we had moved. I got a phone call from the O2. We were scheduled to be at the Indigo. And I got a phone call from the O2. I think it was around 6 o'clock at night. I got a phone call from the O2 saying AEG arenas worldwide are closing. Everything is getting cancelled. Your show next week won't be happening. And up until this point, I was telling everybody, we're going ahead, providing we have a venue. So we had an hour. They said they were going to put the press release out within the hour. So they gave me an hour's notice. So within the hour, we had switched the event from the O2 in London to Manchester. We had 7 days to rejig everything. And when it came to fight day, everybody thought the show was still going to be cancelled. Like the fighters' heads were fucking wrecked because they didn't know. I'm telling them nothing is going to stop the show from happening. And on the news, the fucking world is shutting down. You know, I'm getting shit from everyone as to why I'm still pushing ahead with this show. But in my head, the UK government didn't shut down. The UK was open for business, and there was nothing bad happening in the UK at that time. So I'd said to my guys, I had even moved the times forward. We were supposed to go to the venue at whatever time it was, and I called my staff and said, change the buses, get the buses here an hour earlier, let everybody know what's going on. As long as we get everybody inside that venue, close the gates and put a fucking lock and chain around it, we're not leaving. Because once we're in, that broadcast is happening, the guys can fight, and we go home. We did that, and an hour after the show finished, the UK went into lockdown.
Wow.
Got everybody out, everybody home, we got them their fight, we got home, we took a few weeks out, and then I started getting my head back into, right, how can we keep this going and keep you guys active now? So then we have to deal with the DCMS and go through all the procedures that they had at the time. And yeah, we got the clearance to go ahead, and we set up the whole trilogy series and started moving from there. The biggest part was the hotel, dealing with the hotels at the beginning.
Sounds like quite a stressful time for you in terms of the amount of just the amount of phone calls you must have been taking non-stop from different people and departments.
There was 3 phones going at one point. Yeah. Well, there's one thing I don't do stress. So I have no interest in the word stress. I believe it only exists if you allow it to exist. I do
exactly
2 emotions.
that. Yeah.
I do happy and anger. And anger is when someone doesn't fucking do something that's so simple that you haven't kept your side of the deal up. And happy is when we're all done. So stress, I don't do it. I have no interest in it.
Interesting. I like that. You'll have to pass that along to me.
Yeah, you seem a real pusher and striver, and you obviously want big things. You've done a fantastic job with Cage Warriors. Could it be that you might try to push to conquer Europe with Cage Warriors, and maybe therefore even the US? Is this something that's a possibility? Because at the moment the world sort of comes to Cage Warriors. Is there a chance that Cage Warriors could be pushing out to the world?
Yeah, we're pushing on. I mean, we in the pandemic we launched in the United States. We opened up Southern California. We done 2 shows in San Diego. Both sold out 2 weeks prior to show day. 2022 schedule will have a very mainland Europe footprint. So we'll be doing London, Ireland, France, Sweden. We're going to step into Italy, and California as well. So we've got plans on what we're doing. We've got a nice little structure going on, and we're slowly building the roster. So I've said from the beginning when I took this thing over, I wouldn't get involved in doing something unless we're going to build it to be something big. So I believe we've done that. Now it's a case of where we go next. And we've 107, 108 guys have gone from Cage Warriors into the UFC now. Long may that continue. We I call Cage Warriors the pressure cooker, because guys get tested on Cage Warriors. You can go off to any organization or any smaller hall show in the UK and you can build up an 8, 9, 10-0 record quite easily. But when you go through the opponents that some of these guys have that have these records, there's not one credible opponent in there that you can say he's been tested. Whereas with Cage Warriors, we try and step guys up a notch every fight. And we'll have these conversations with people. We'll say, that was a great win you've had last time. We need to step you up a little bit. Some guys shy away from it. Some guys, they want it. They ask for it. I've got 4 or 5 guys on this double trouble card that we got coming up, and they're demanding they want to be fighting for titles. And we're like, slow the fuck down. You've got so much development in you. Why do you want to win the belt now? You win the belt now, there's no more easy fights. There's no more fights for you to be developed. And I'm strong believer that once you get that belt, your development time is gone. Because now you got to take all comers. Whereas when you're in the division, we're stepping you up based on your last performance and based on where we think you are within that division. And, there's 107, 108 guys going to the UFC. I think we kind of know what we're doing. Some people disagree with us, but we let what you see do the talking.
Craig, on that note, Craig in the chat just asked a question regarding the UFC and Cage Warriors. He says, do Cage Warriors get any money from the UFC because they feed up so many fighters into their organization, or is it just a case of each fighter negotiates their individual contracts?
Absolutely zero. Wouldn't that be fucking great if we did? We're busting our balls trying to fucking get bums on seats to actually try and turn a profit. If we can get money from signing guys to the UFC, man, it'd be fucking heaven. I reckon we're a long way away from that. But you know what? The sport is growing, right? When I came into the sport in 2010, medicals were fucking non-existent. We set up Safe MMA. We're a founding member of Safe MMA, and I strongly believe Cage Warriors has been the backbone of Safe MMA for the entirety of its existence. when we first started with that, everybody was on board with it. All the other promotions that were doing same level shows that we were on board with doing that. When it came down to how much work was involved to keep these guys getting these medicals, people started popping off. And at one point, we were the only person, and I still believe we're probably the only major show holding up the safe MMA flag. And I'm happy we did that because it's helped change the sport for the better, and it's helped show some legitimacy within the sport that was a wild, wild west prior. You know, the medicals for safe MMA, the competing cage warriors, are a little bit higher than the UFC. You know, there is a lot to go in to the medicals to fight in cage warriors. And some guys could easily go, fuck it, I don't do it, I'm going to fight somewhere else. But when that time came, when we brought in the brain scans of cage warriors, I think there was at least 4 or 5 guys who were actively fighting, middle of their career. We're told, don't ever fucking fight again. Don't even go to a gym and do a bench press again. Don't even hold your breath lifting a weight, because they had issues that the MRIs and the MRAs were showing up. And even to this day, I'm blown away. Maybe it's me getting older. And 10 years ago, I was 10 years younger and a little bit wilder, a little bit more reckless. But I look back now and I'm like, I'm fucking pissed that we didn't have these medicals back then, because nothing serious happened. But looking on the situations that some of the tests that have come back to us and some of the phone calls I've had to make since we brought these medicals in, you know, any show that's not doing any kind of serious medicals, they're fucking about with some dangerous shit.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about before, like on numerous times with various guests, like the things like CTE, we don't know even now a particularly great amount about it, because if a lot of it is reliant on people donating their brains to science after they pass away. It can't be diagnosed until after people have died, which obviously creates all sorts of issues and stuff. But I find it remarkable that in 2021 that there's any MMA companies who would not have those kind of safety protocols.
They're not doing it, Si. There's nobody doing it. We're the only ones doing it.
Should be the law.
It should be. It'll never come into law because the UK government need to get involved if they're going to actually back the sport and give the governing body the control over a sport to make that happen. But this needs to start with gyms and it needs to start with coaches. Coaches, the first question the coach needs to ask when their fighter is contacted for a bout in any organization, what medicals are you doing? Because that's where it needs to start. As soon as coaches start asking organizations, what medicals are you putting in place for my guy to step into your octagon, that's when things will start changing. That's when organizations will start making guys get their safe MMA. Now, when we started doing safe MMA first, we almost lost everything, because we were trying to put cards together. We tell them what the medicals were, and they say, oh, fuck that, I can fight down the road without getting those medicals done. I'm going to fight another show. But then the other shows won't get involved in making the medicals happen because the fighters tell them, we're not doing it. I don't want to pay the money. So the fighters are getting their medicals done, becoming cage warriors, but other promotions are allowing them to fight the same 3-5 minute full pro rules with no medicals. You don't even fucking know what's going on inside a person's head. You know, you don't know if there's a tiny little blood vessel there that's just ready to get touched, and bang, that's that person gone. This is serious shit. And it needs to start. The coaches in these gyms up and down the country need to start challenging promoters and guys running shows, saying, what medicals are you getting done for my guy? Are you putting in place for my guy to fight in your octagon? Now, I don't believe it's on the promoter to pay the medicals for the fighter. I believe the safe MMA clearance is the equivalent of having a driver's license to drive a fucking car. You know, you have to get your own license to drive a car. If you want to fight, you need to get Safe MMA cleared. You know, and it's a small little thing, but there's so many people still turning a blind eye to it, and it's going to happen again. There's going to be an accident. There's going to be somebody in an octagon. It'll be the last time in an octagon, and it could have very easily been stopped. Coaches
I'm shocked by that. I really am.
Get your medicals done.
And the potential impact, can you imagine on, you know, God forbid, on any of these other promotions where a fatality or, you know, something along the lines of something really tragic happening, you know, it could put us back into what France has just come out of, you know, in getting it banned.
Yeah. When you were, Danny, when you were fighting, the sport's 20 fucking years old. Was it 25 years old? When you were fighting, that's the start of that. It's the start of the sport. There was no science around training. There was no any kind of serious medical backing around the sport. So you did what you did for the love of the sport and for the competitiveness of it. But we have no excuse to not be involved in making things as safe as possible for people now.
Yeah.
You know? The sport is nearly a quarter of a fucking century old. There are medicals there. There are clinics up and down the country where you can go and get a brain scan. You can get your MRIs, you can get your MRAs, you can get your bloods, your physicals, you get everything done. That's good for a year. You know? Would you not want to know that you're okay if you're about to go into a fucking fist fight?
Yeah.
You know? We're here. It's 2020. We're going into 2022. And Cage Warriors is probably still the only fucking organization that's pushing safety for these guys to compete. It's fucking nuts. It baffles me. Absolutely baffles me. You know?
Yeah, when you explain it in the way that you do, it you know, because it can get so easily overlooked. You know, from a fan's perspective as well, they don't understand what goes into a promotion, let alone what isn't being put into the safety in many regards with a lot of other promotions like you're pointing out. But yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be pushed. And you're exactly right. You know, it is going to be down to the coaches. I've been to a few different meetings and stuff based all around this, and you know, that really enlightened me to the importance of safe MMA. And I do think at the right time, and it is just going to be a time served where it just has to keep digging away, I think it will end up being something that promotions have to go through to even get license to put on fight events. I think that's the way it has to be. But you're right, the difficulty is getting it recognized by governments. It's trying to get someone that's in the know, got those contacts. I know that's a big stone to get over and get through, but I think it's absolutely possible. But yeah, it gets so easily overlooked. But yeah, of course, the utmost safety is of the combatants. You know, they're the ones in there getting their brains bashed about.
Yeah, but what I find remarkable about it very quickly is, like, if you look at just in football over the last probably last 10 years, how many footballers have had heart conditions picked up through medical testing and things like that, or even after the medical testing, there's still been footballers who've had heart. You know, Christian Eriksen in the Euros just gone. There's been Fabrice Muamba who collapsed on the pitch. There's been players who've died even with the medical testing in place. So you imagine when you're going to fight, you know, have a fist fight with someone, and you don't know, like Graham said, you don't know what's going on in someone's head, and it doesn't have to be like a big shot or a prolonged shots to the head that could cause that issue. It's I assumed that Safe MMA was like a countrywide thing, and that all regional organizations, all British MMA organizations and promotions had to have that in place. That's what I assumed. But again, you know, because that to me is common sense, Graham, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So to the people who are watching this and the people who hopefully will watch it over the next few days, if you're a coach in a gym, okay, and you've got a team of guys that are training and you've got a bond with those guys, it's your fucking responsibility to make sure that they get their medicals done, because you're the one that's leading them to battle. You're the one training them to battle, and you're the one letting them step into an octagon, not knowing whether they're medically fit to go into an octagon. Now, I want to put a big push on safety within the sport in 2022. And I want to put it to every coach in the country. How would you feel if one of your guys doesn't come back to the gym?
Yeah.
How will you feel for the rest of your life if one of your guys doesn't come back to the gym and it was all because he didn't get medicals done to compete on a show that wasn't asking for medicals? This is not looked upon. And if we want to take things seriously, you need to start with the medical side of things. You need to peel the layers back on the onion. And that starts in the gyms. It starts with a promoter contacting a coach saying, I've got a fight next month. It's on Saturday. It's against this guy. If you got someone, yeah, I've got someone. We'll be there. That's 2006, 2008 talk. This is 2021. How that conversation should go is, I've got a fucking space next Saturday or next month on a show. Do you have anyone? That first question is there medicals on this show? No, there's not. Hang the fucking phone up.
Mm-hmm.
Hang the fucking phone up. Is there medicals on the show? It's Safe MMA. Great. Let's progress the conversation. Who's the opponent? What's the date? What's the pay? We'll be there. You know, we're dealing with people's lives here, man.
Yeah. You know what? It needs to be pushed. It absolutely needs to be pushed. And it's kind of shocking because the presumption, you're right, Si, the presumption is that you would think a lot of the professional promotions are doing this and going through those channels of safety, but it appears not, and yeah, it's kind of shocking in today's climate that this isn't happening.
Contact Safe MMA. Ask them how many organizations in the UK have every professional fight on the Safe MMA guidelines. Guarantee it'll blow your fucking mind.
Yeah.
One.
Yep. Yeah, shocking.
Crazy.
Shocking.
But I'll sleep easy knowing I did everything in my power to make sure that every athlete that steps inside a Cage Warriors octagon is medically cleared and fit to do so.
Mm.
Great stuff.
And like I said, we're a fighters organization. We put the fighters first, and we think in the fighters' shoes before we do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
Graham, I appreciate you giving us even a few minutes extra than what we previously said, but I feel like that conversation was very much worth it and needed. But I hope we haven't kept you too long. I appreciate you joining us. I appreciate your time. I could sit here and talk to you for the next hour or so, but I know you're tired and you've had a busy day and stuff for your flight. But I appreciate your time, mate. Thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll get you back on again sometime.
Not a problem, guys. Thank you for having me on, and good to chat with you. I hope this spreads out and people watch it, and the fighters and coaches kind of get the gist on this medical side. So I want to
absolutely
2022.
Yeah, we'll get pushing it, Graham. Don't you worry about that. And good to finally talk to you because we always just see each other very fleetingly. So it's great to talk to you.
Take care, Dan. Thanks,
cheers,
guys. Look after yourself. Look.
Yeah.
Eye opener.
Indeed,
very much an eye opener.
Fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed that. And as is always the case with the interviews and the chats we have, because we do them in a relaxed way, and it's not like a formal interview. I love the way that things go, and you can be on various different subjects, and you could end up talking about something which you didn't plan on talking about. But also, it's an incredibly important subject, and it's quite shocking in a way that it's even a thing in 2021. I got to be honest, I'm shocked by it. So look, we did a longer show today. We had two guests. Obviously, having someone like Graham on is a big treat, and something which is not something that we expected on Friday. So it came about quite quickly last night, and delighted to have him join us, and hopefully he'll join us again in the future. But I know you want to talk about last night's UFC, mate. So we've kept the people quite long, so we're coming up to 2 hours. So I'll let you kind of run through it as
problem.
quick as possible, mate. But so the first fight was Adrian Yanez defeated Davy Grant via a split decision.
Yeah, I was surprised it was a split decision, although David Grant did do a good account of himself, as he always does. Initially, always wants it striking, doesn't he? But Adrian Yanez, absolutely amazing counter-striking capabilities. The difference between them both was David Grant was throwing combinations and nice flamboyant, really creative combinations, but he was just chucking them out there. What Adrian Yanez was doing was seeing where the openings was, seeing where the mistakes was. When he was throwing out a jab, was his hand retracting back? If it wasn't, he was following it back in and getting his own punches off, his own kicks off. Very, very high level awareness of striking that Yanez showed me. Great fighter. David Grant still did great, but like I say, I just felt like he was chucking out his combination, not setting them up as well as Adrian was setting up those counters. So I was quite surprised it's a split decision. Yanez did very, very good.
Indeed, mate. And then next up we had Rani Yahya versus Kung Hung Kang with Yahya getting the unanimous decision victory.
Yeah, Yahya it's all about him trying to close the distance, get the wrestling going. Looked on shaky ground in the first round. Kang was doing really, really well with the striking. Looked very, very dangerous, and Yahya looked kind of like it was going to struggle to find a way to get access to him, get him to the ground. Did some funny decisions in that first round as well. Yahya did do a takedown. Then when Kang scrambled back to his feet, started trying to drag him to the floor and then went for a leg lock, strangely. Lost control of Kang. I was thinking, well, if the rounds continue like that, my mind's going to go with Kang. But Yahya started to really get together his wrestling and his control on the ground and just started to squeeze the fight out of Kang. Really impressive performance. Clearly they had a grappling difference and a physicality difference on the ground in Yahya looking so strong, and just started really dominating Yang on the ground, just crushed the game out of him. It was really impressive. What can I say? Kang must have been frustrated. I think he's 37 now. So, having losses like that is not going to do him any favours regards trying to move up into the rankings. And in that weight division, being at that sort of age, I don't know where his position is going to be in the long term in UFC.
Yeah, indeed, mate. Then we had Talia Santos, defeated Joanne Wood via a rear naked choke just before the end of round one. Yeah,
I mean, Joanna Wood, she's a great striker, but Talia Santos, she's got great striking and grappling. And I think, if she's going to play it safe, she was always going to have to push it to the ground. But showed great capabilities in striking. In fact, she knocked Joanna Wood to the ground at one time. Didn't even have to do the takedown. She literally punched her to the ground. Just looking really dominant in all areas. She looked like she could have taken the fight in all areas, but the safe route was to get Joanna Wood to the ground, because obviously Joanna Wood, as we know, is a pretty proficient striker, but she just couldn't deal with Santos's power, crispness, and technical superiority, and more to the point that she was just more well-rounded. Really, really good performance, and I think we're going to see, Santos making some noises for a title push.
Yes, I think so. And then the co-main event was Sean Brady defeating Michael Chiesa via unanimous decision. Brady ranked 13. Chiesa ranked 6. What did you make of this?
Yeah,
a bit of a shock.
I mean, look, I was shocked. I know Sean Brady's really, been looking very, very good. I just thought he was going to give too much overall size away to Chiesa. Chiesa is obviously very, very big at the weight, so it gets mentioned a lot in the commentary, and he is really, really big at the weight. He just couldn't impose himself out at range long enough. Sean Brady was very, very patient. You just got the real sense that Brady was just waiting to go and get in and get an early clinch to the advantage and get it to ground and smother the game out of Chiesa. And he did exactly that. Chiesa just seemed a beat behind. He just couldn't quite get his groove. In and get an early.
Sorry.
So, bit of a reverberance there. So really impressive. Sean Brady really was. Was, I think, unexpected from many people's perspective watching this fight. But Sean Brady, he's gone up in my rankings and up in my estimations of him. He's now going to start having people in that top 10 sit up and take notice, because it looks like he's on the way up.
Indeed, mate. Yeah, Michael Chiesa has been on a bit of a weird run,
he's
been doing all right. Like, doing really well. So I was shocked. And then the main event was Caitlin Vieira defeated Miesha Tate. Vieira ranked 7, Tate ranked 8, so it was always going to be close, but a unanimous decision in Vieira's favor.
Yeah, it was the right decision. I know in the commentary and some people posting up, you get the little clip it in the corner of other fighters and people of note in the world of MMA, saying where they felt the fight was going. Some were saying Tate was winning, some were saying Vieira was winning. It was one of those fights that was very, very hard to judge. You had Tate pushing Vieira back and also landing sometimes in some of the rounds more of the strikes. But every time Vieira landed, it looked like it was really consequential to the aesthetic, the face of Tate. She was wearing the fight more on her face as the fight progressed. But I just was frustrated by Vieira. And the commentators picked up on it that if only she just pushed forward, and she just landed a really, really nice low calf kick on Tate, which was hugely consequential to her. It kicked her and she had to about turn. She spun on the spot. She just wasn't strategizing enough, and I felt like she could have actually stopped Tate with her striking if she just used it in the right format. So a little frustrating, but full of potential. I mean, funny we could understand Portuguese because the corner were really shouting at Vieira, but I think it was through frustration. I think the corner team could see the way to a easier victory than the route that she took. She was just holding back, whether it's because Miesha Tate comes with a lot of publicity surrounding her, that she's been a former UFC champion, making a real, true, meaningful comeback. And after that performance, which was a good performance by Tate overall, she's definitely there to try to make attack on that title for real. It wasn't just coming back to have a few fights. She really thinks she can make roads towards that title. The only questionable thing about Tate's game was this really elongated guard and rather wide stance as well. And this left her vulnerable to the counters of Vieira. And she was getting countered up good and proper occasionally. She did duck out of the way and showed some head movement that kept her elusive, but that did leave her heavy on that lead leg. And that's why, again, I was frustrated at Caitlin Vieira not capitalizing on the calf kick more, because to move your head as much as Tate would, you had to put a lot of weight over that extended lead leg, and that would make that lead leg vulnerable. So a lot of strategical work on Caitlin Vieira if she wants to start taking some other big scalps. I mean, that was a big scalp to take, don't get me wrong, but she's capable of so much more. That's what I feel. For Miesha Tate, I don't know what she plans to do here on out. I mean, she could still make a run for that belt. She's clearly made improvements with her striking. She just struggled to get her wrestling to work in any meaningful way. But she's going to face people like this if she wants to stamp authority and become a title holder again in the modern day climate. Has she got what it takes? From the look of that fight, quite possibly so, but she's got to make further inroads for improvements. I would like to see her tighten up that guard for one. And for Vieira, I've already sort of summed it up, really. She just has to strategize, and I think she could potentially become an unstoppable force, but it's all about whether her team can get her to have more fight IQ, because she has the physicality. She's big, she's tall, she's rangy, she's clearly strong, and she's well-rounded. She's gifted on the ground as well as on the feet. They've just got to get it all in the right order, and then I think we're going to see someone real special.
Yeah, 100%, mate. I couldn't have said it better myself there. A couple of little questions very quickly. Daniel Baz Joseph said, Danny, did you do much jiu-jitsu?
Yes. I'd done a lot of grappling with Lee Hasdall, which was Japanese Shuto, Japanese shoot wrestling. So obviously was versed in the grappling arts before I crossed over to doing BJJ in 2001, 2002. I think it was 2002 I started doing BJJ. And that really made me understand the grappling. The Japanese shooter is very much jumping on a submission and chaining one submission after another, but the jiu-jitsu really brought the sense of, how to control someone and, how to, get around the guard, how to stack your weight, how to attack base and balance on a whole new, different way. It was massively important to my game, and something that I do push my MMA fighters, if they want to go pro level, to really get to understand the art of BJJ as well. Although it seems like such a big difference in in its martial art visual, training in a gi with no strikes, and whereas MMA is obviously with strikes and not in a gi. It does help your base and balance in that if someone could grab hold of your collar and your sleeve and start trying to sweep you, if you can defend yourself there and become aware of your base in that certain circumstance, then you'll absolutely easily defend your base and balance where someone can't grab a sleeve and a collar. So I think it gives you a better sense of balance, and it also in turn helps you understand how to break someone's balance and create scrambles. And there's a lot that can be taken from BJJ that can help advance your MMA. But yeah, to get back to the question, yes, I did do a lot of jiu-jitsu. I competed a fair bit as well back when I was going through my belts to help me progress. But of course, as my career took off bigger and bigger, I had less time to compete, and I had to really invest my time off work to go and compete around the world to MMA.
Yes, indeed, mate. I like it. I like it a lot. Look, a long but very, very enjoyable show this evening.
Absolutely.
Just hit the 2-hour mark. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in and stuck with us. I think it's been worth it. First of all, we were joined by Josh Reichardt, a US amateur kickboxer and MMA fighter who gave us a really unique look into the US amateur side of things, and also the early days of his career. And then we were joined by Cage Warriors president, Mr. Graham Boylan, for an absolutely fascinating chat. And there was some really good stuff there. I'm going to be busy sorting out clips from this show, I think. But it's been fantastic. As ever, thank you to everyone who's watched. Thank you to everyone who's downloaded over the week. And of course, please do check out manscaped.com. Really, really helps us out. Use the code FIGHTSHOW. Get 20% off and worldwide free shipping. Treat yourself before Christmas.
Kickboxers and jiu-jitsu guys, wrestlers, I swear by the boxers. They're amazing. You got to get them. Great Christmas present as we've got Christmas around the corner.
Absolutely, top draw. But until next week, we'll be back next Sunday with an all-new guest from the world of combat sports. I can't remember who it is off the top of my head. Oh, yes, I can. It is Jack Tucker, fresh off his first professional win last night. So really looking forward to speaking to the Merthyr Mauler. Fresh, he's from Shaw Mixed Martial Arts, and he made his pro debut last night, winning by unanimous decision. So really looking forward to having a chat to him, fresh off his victory. So that's going to be a good one. And we are pretty much, I think we're fully booked now. I think we've got one date left before Christmas, where we have still waiting back to hear from people. Other than that, we are fully booked. So all I can say is, I guess there's a reason why we're fully booked.
Yeah,
is what it is.
Exactly.
Make of that of what you like, but it is what it is. But there was a comment earlier. Where did I say? Oh, there it is. Gaz says, best combat sports show in UK, criminally underrated. That's not me saying that. That is Gaz. We just like to do it. Thank you, guys. See you next week. I'll be back tomorrow with an all-new live show. Thank you, Danny.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The champion, welcome, Danny Batten.
Yeah.